there is sort of a disconnect going on. This is something I was talking to Jack Posobiec about recently. There's like this disconnect, this idea that, you know, you have to play by the rules. You have to have very specific principles. And he's always like, principles without power is basically just totally useless. You know what I mean? So I'm glad to see Bailey doing this. I'm glad that Congress is dragging Alvin Bragg in for a subpoena. I think it's stupid that it's July 12th instead of prior to
the trial.
You know, the former president being sentenced. I think that's ridiculous. But yeah, more red state prosecutors should be doing this. It's not reasonable that this is going on. And this is something Charlie Kirk was talking about too. It's the Democrats have a machine. Not, the conservatives have a movement, but the Democrats have a machine.
And Andrew Bailey's interesting because he really is active. I mean, he's gone after Planned Parenthood. He's gone after a lot of issues. I think he is someone who feels as though he is representing the interests of his state and the interests of the people who live there. It seems like so often people are afraid of losing office if they stand up for sort of conservative values.
Who is he going after? IBM, Planned Parenthood? Who else?
He had
Joe Biden with the free speech stuff. Yeah.
I mean, I just feel like I see his name every couple months being like, I'm taking action. I did feel this way about Patrick Morrissey in West Virginia. I felt like he was really on the ball for a while. But again, we didn't see any turn to the Trump aspect of this. I think it is good for them to prioritize what's going on in their state. On the other hand, what is happening as people go after
standing,
the president.
But yeah.
So this morning, we had a very fun conversation on the Culture War podcast over at Tenet Media. And, normally we go 2 hours, but the third hour just went into it. Andrew Wilson and I were fiercely debating the prospect of social collapse, decay, civil war, civil strife, etc. And I don't know how much was accomplished with the arguments that were made, but the arguments that I usually make are things like this, interstate lawfare and interstate conflict, are indicative of the breakdown of social order. I mean, let's do the time travel test. I love it. If you went back to 2017 and said in 2024, right before the election, Missouri will be suing New York for unconstitutional prosecution of the presidential frontrunner, accusing them of trying to stop him from being able to win the election through state-level criminal action, who would believe you?
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
And now it's happening. I mean, Trump is guilty, they said, in New York. We haven't even had the election yet, and we're already getting interstate legal conflict.
Well, and at the end of after the 2020 election, we had interstate legal conflict, but the Supreme Court refused to take it up when Texas teamed up with some other states and sued Pennsylvania because Pennsylvania wasn't following their constitutionally written obligations with regard to how voting should be conducted. And the Supreme Court refused to take that up, which was lame. Yes.
So what's the end result of things like this? I'll put it this way. If no one does anything, then fine. Like Andrew Wilson's premise was, he said Biden will get elected, Trump supporters will grumble and do nothing, and Democrats will expand their control, and that will be it. It'll be over. Mm-hmm. And we had Richard Spencer on as well, and he said that he thinks it will be the last election.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of that, and it definitely it does feel like we're at this crisis moment, and there's so many clashes that are looming ahead of us. But there's also the propensity of human beings to want to be at the end times, to want to imagine that they are at the most essential crux of history. So are we at the most essential crux of history? I don't know. I mean, I'm sure that the guys in the trenches in World War I thought they were as well.
Mm-hmm. But they were.
And they sure were.
I mean, and there's a lot of arguments to be made about whether we should have not been involved in World War I. But as Norm Macdonald put, hey, the good guys have won every war. Mm-hmm. Now, his point is, the people who win will declare themselves the good guys. But the point is, there's a resolution to a mass conflict when those conflicts happen. And at the time, it is the biggest problem. If there's a hostage situation, that's the most important thing in the world to that community where it's happening.
But nobody notices, for example, Darfur is about to explode again. Yeah. And no one's paying any attention to
my point is, for the United States, with lawfare, criminal actions against the front runner for the presidency, we are in the most dire time. But let me just stress this, too. I mean, never before has a president been found guilty of 34 felonies, of a felony at all, been put on trial, been threatened with prison. All of this is unprecedented. Mm-hmm.